Hello everyone. The topic for today's discussion are the muscles of the anterior abdominal wall. The muscles of the anterior abdominal wall are very important during various movements which take place in the trunk and also various movements which are due to the pressure changes inside the abdominal cavity or the thoracic cavity. Myself Dr. Ankit Khandelwal, MBBS and MS in Anatomy. This is my YouTube channel Anatomy Explained. If you have not yet subscribed, consider subscribing the channel. All the concepts of the human body are discussed over here. I have various Facebook pages, the Telegram groups. The links of those are there in the description box below. So let us start with the topic that is the muscles of the anterior abdominal wall. So if you have gone to the previous video, in the previous video we have discussed the layers of the anterior abdominal wall. In those layers which start from the skin and end at the parietal peritoneum, in between those we have the muscles. What are those muscles? Lying anterolaterally or laterally, the muscles from superficial to deep, that is from outer to inside, are your external oblique muscle. Then you have deep to it, you have the internal oblique muscle, and deep to the internal oblique we have the transversus abdominis muscle. So these are the three muscles lying anterolaterally or laterally. The muscle which lies close to the midline or medially is the rectus abdominis muscle, is another muscle that is known as the rectus abdominis muscle. And a very small muscle sometimes present deep to the lower part of the rectus abdominis, it could not be present also, is your small functional sort of irrelevant muscle, that is pyramidalis muscle. Now let us see what do their names actually mean. When we say oblique, oblique means at an angle. So these muscles obliques, they are not horizontally or they are not vertically straight, not horizontally straight, they are lying at an angle, lying outside external, lying inside internal. Transverse abdominis, no, it is a muscle lying in the abdomen which is transverse. Transverse is horizontally placed. Now rectus abdominis, it is a muscle in abdomen which is lying straight. Rectus means straight. Like we have a gyrus rectus, we have the rectus muscles. So rectus means straight. Now we have the pyramidalis is a very small irrelevant sort of functionally irrelevant sort of muscle. Sometimes it is present. Now why we call it pyramidalis? Because when you combine the muscles of both sides, they form a shape like a pyramid, a very small muscle shaped like a pyramid. So these are the various muscles. Now if you recall the previous session on the anterior abdominal wall, we discussed about their nerve supply. We said the whole nerve supply of the anterior abdominal wall is supplied by the lower six thoracic nerves, that is T7 to T12, and including your L1 at the lowermost part. So T7 to T12 and L1 will be the nerve supply of these muscles only. Not all of them, but yes, few of them. Now T12 over here specifically called as subcostal nerve. L1 is given a name, that is the iliohypogastric nerve, whose branch, a collateral branch, is named as the ilioinguinal nerve. So these are few names. Now over here, this pyramidalis is a very short muscle, very small muscle, so it is only supplied by T12. The external oblique and the rectus abdominis, they are supplied by T7 to T12. While these two, in addition to T7 to T12, these also receive branches from L1. Why? Because these two, that is the internal oblique and the transverse abdominis, their lowermost fibers, they form a conjoint tendon which goes down and inserts into the pubic tubercle. So L1 fibers may also contribute to their nerve supply. That was a nerve supply which we already done in the anterior abdominal wall and the names of the muscles. Now let us see what are these muscles actually doing. So how are we going to proceed from here? We are going to proceed that we are first going to limit ourselves to the anterolateral muscles. Then we'll come to these midline muscles. So let us start with the anterolateral muscles. So these anterolateral muscles, whose names actually are, if we write in a short form, that is the external oblique, internal oblique, and transverse abdominis. These anterolateral muscles, they are actually muscular. They are muscular where they are muscular posterolaterally. And they are aponeurotic. Aponeurotic means the flattened tendon. They are tendinous anteromedially. Now what does it mean? It means very simple. On the sides, the muscle, they are the main muscle fibers, but as they reach anterior medially, they are actually covering the rectus abdominis muscle, because the muscle present over midline, that is close to the median plane medially, is the rectus abdominis. So these muscles, that is external oblique, internal transverse, once they try to reach around the rectus abdominis, they are no longer muscles, they are just the flattened tendons which surround the rectus abdominis muscle in the form of a rectus sheath. So here we have the rectus sheath. The rectus sheath is nothing but it is formed by the aponeurosis of these three muscles: external oblique, internal oblique, and transverse abdominis. Okay, so one thing important: where they are muscular, where they are aponeurotic. Now let us see at how they are attached and which parts of the body are they attached. So if we try to make over here the lateral side, so if we have a lateral view, if we have a lateral view, okay, then supposedly that this is the anterior abdominal wall over here, that is the anterior abdominal wall, okay, and here you have the ribs. Supposedly you start with the fifth rib, then you have the sixth rib, then you have the seventh, then you have the eighth, ninth, 10th, 11th, and 12th. Okay, now below what we have, below we have the iliac crest, that is your hip bone. So here we will be having the iliac crest, that is a part of hip bone. Now anteriorly it goes somewhat like this, posterior the ischial, the sciatic notches, the ischial spines. Okay, then we have the ischial tuberosity, and then it goes somewhat like this, attaches anteriorly over here. Then you have this obturator foramen. On the lateral side you will also have this acetabulum. Posteriorly we have the sacrum, it is attached, sacrum and coccyx, which is attached to the posterior side. Okay, now what we said that, okay, if this is the whole picture like this over here, the whole picture, that is, this is the anterior part of the figure, that is the posterior part of the figure. We said in the previous slide that the muscles, these muscles are actually muscular posterolaterally and they are aponeurotic anteromedially. So it means that this is the anterior and posterior, then this side they should be muscular, and that is what happens. That is what happens is that if we first talk of the external oblique muscle, if we first talk of the external oblique muscle, it is oblique. So direction of the fibers of the external oblique muscle, they are going downwards and forwards. Like if you wear a jacket, then the when you put your hands inside the pocket of the jacket, then they go in this direction, downwards and forwards. That is the direction of the fibers of the external oblique. So the ultimate direction, if I make over here, is this direction, if you look at the from the diagrammatic perspective. Now therefore these muscles are muscular posterolaterally, so they should be muscular in the posterior part and aponeurotic in the anterior part. So we start from here, and if we make a benchmark with this dotted line, that okay, from here they will start to be anteriorly, they will start to have their aponeurosis. Okay, they will start to have their aponeurosis. Then if we make it posteriorly muscular, then let us try this color over here, then these would be the fibers of the muscles. That would be the direction of the fibers of the muscles. Okay, that is the direction fibers of the external oblique. So from where does it arise? It arises from the, obviously, the lower rib cage, the lower 6 to 8 ribs. From there it arises the external oblique muscle, and it will go above this whole iliac crest and all, and these will be the posterior fiber. These are the posterior fibers will go down. Okay, now once they reach this dotted line, what is this dotted line? That is anteromedially. From here you have the rectus abdominis muscle. So the muscular part is not, will not be remaining muscular from here. So what it remains, what changes from here is it becomes aponeurotic. So then these muscles which are coming from the lower rib cage, the muscular fibers which are coming from the lower rib cage, if I make it completely like this, okay, then they suddenly become aponeurotic and they start to attach onto the linea alba. Now what was linea alba? Linea alba was in the midline where all the aponeurosis they cross each other. It is in the midline. So that is how the aponeurotic fibers. Now the external oblique, this green color is denoting the aponeurotic fibers. Now the aponeurosis of the external oblique, the lower margin, it actually turns on it in itself. It rolls inwards on itself. So it forms a double layer at the lowermost margin, and that is your inguinal ligament. And this becomes your inguinal ligament. Very, very important part, inguinal ligament. Okay, so this is what is inguinal ligament? It is a lower upturned margin of the external oblique aponeurosis, not the muscle. And this part is this, and here you have a gap also in the external oblique aponeurosis. That gap is your, or that hole is your superficial inguinal ring. That hole is your superficial inguinal ring. So remember these points, we'll discuss them again when we'll discuss in the other videos of the inguinal canal. These things will come again. So I repeat again, the lowermost upturned margins, inguinal ligament, and the gap, that is the superficial inguinal ring. Now, so in a nutshell, this is the external oblique muscle. The fibers are going downward and forward. Okay, they are coming from the lower rib cage. They attach over the iliac crest. Then their aponeurosis it goes in front of the rectus abdominis muscle, which will be present over here in this area, and they attach to the whole linea alba. Then their lower margin inguinal ligament in the superficial inguinal ring. Now, one more point which we should be knowing over here is that the posterior margin of the external oblique muscle is free. We can say the external oblique muscle has a free posterior border, and it forms a boundary, anterior boundary of a lumbar triangle of Petit's or Petit's triangle. So it is one of that parts, the Petit's triangle. So if you look at the whole muscle, the muscle is actually it actually fans. It actually fans means it actually spreads out. It actually spreads out in a fashion that the upper fibers are sort of horizontal. Try to understand this also. The lower or the posterior fibers are sort of vertical. So basically obliquity is where in the middle fibers. Obliquity is where mainly in the middle fibers. Okay, so these are present just beneath the skin and superficial fascia. That was the external oblique muscle. The location will come to the when we come to the actions. The action will combine and will do that in combination with all the muscles, because individual muscles they don't act. All the muscles they act in union. So that was the external oblique muscle. Now if we go from here into the internal oblique muscle. Now let us see what is happening to the internal oblique muscle. So internal oblique. Now internal oblique muscle, very simple, it is lying internal to the external oblique muscle. The direction will be just the opposite of the external oblique. So external oblique was coming downward and forward, so this will be going upward and forward. This will be going upward and forward. So they actually cross each other. They are known as obliques. So again the anti-abdominal, on the anterior side we have it like this, then we have this ribs over here from the top. Okay, we have this posterior part of the body, this posterior part of the body, and then we have this iliac crest over here, and then we have this sciatic notches, the ischial spine, greater and lesser sciatic notches, the ischial tuberosity going above this. We have the obturator foramen, then we have the acetabulum on the lateral side, we have the sacrum, the coccyx on this side. That is the whole simple arrangement. Now if you remember, then we made a inguinal ligament. Inguinal ligament is like this. So we'll keep this inguinal ligament. Why? Because the internal oblique muscle, it also takes origin from the inguinal ligament. Okay, so obviously this is the anterior part, that is the posterior part. These are ribs over here. Fine, this is around the level of umbilicus. So this is your inguinal ligament. Let us just name it as I dot ligament. Okay, now internal oblique muscle will be having the direction opposite, so the direction will be like this. But again, let us just quickly differentiate between where the fibers will become aponeurotic. So again, somewhat from here. So see, the fibers, they will only be muscular posterolaterally. They can't be muscular anteriorly, because anteriorly you already have a muscle, which is a thick muscle, rectus abdominis. So somewhat around over here, these fibers will become aponeurotic as they go anteriorly. Which fibers? The internal oblique fibers. Now this is one thing. Now second thing is, there's also a fascia present posteriorly. There's also a fascia present posteriorly in the lower back. Basically, it is present throughout the back, but it is thickened more in the lower back. And that fascia which is present in the lower back is known as lumbar fascia, or to be precise, thoracolumbar fascia. Thoracolumbar fascia. Why I'm writing this over here? Because this muscle, internal oblique, also takes origin from the lumbar fascia, while external oblique, if you remember, external oblique did not take origin from the lumbar fascia. It had a free posterior border. The posterior border of external oblique was free. Now let's try to make the fibers of internal oblique. Internal oblique are going upward, so the fibers of internal oblique would be like this. Okay, they will be coming also from this lateral two-third of the inguinal ligament, not the whole, but at least the lateral two-third of the inguinal ligament they would be coming. So if we make somewhat lighter color, then this would be the direction of fibers, okay, of the internal oblique, which will also be coming from the thoracolumbar fascia. And where would they attach? They will attach into the lower ribs. Okay, attach into the lower ribs, and then these fibers will go aponeurotic after this, and then as they go aponeurotic, then obviously they are going to insert into the whole linea albi and all, okay. The other thing is, as these fibers, they are coming from the lateral two-third of the inguinal ligament. Now as they are inserting below, then they form a conjoint tendon. They form this conjoint tendon which goes above this canal over here, which is named as inguinal canal. So here we have the location. We'll discuss that in a separate video altogether. Inguinal canal. So these fibers, that is the internal oblique fibers, they are lowermost fibers of the internal oblique, the aponeurosis, along with the fibers of the transverse abdominis, again they are lowermost. they'll form a conjoint tendon. So they conjoint tendon, they form like a sickle shape. So they also known as conjoint tendon or the fox inguinalis. Fox means sickle shaped. In anatomy, we read fox at various places. FALX, fox inguinalis. Okay, so this was the internal oblique. Posterior border is not free. Posterior border is not free. But if you look over here, then you will realize that again its posterior fibers are vertical, like the posterior fibers of the external oblique. Plus its lower fibers are horizontal. So again, it is only the middle fibers which is actually oblique. It is actually which is actually oblique. So if you understand that the middle fibers of the external oblique, they were oblique, the middle fibers of the internal oblique, they are oblique. So it is basically the middle fibers which are actually crossing each other. While if you look at the both the external and internal oblique, their posterior fibers are vertical. Okay, their posterior fibers are vertical, and the upper fibers of the external oblique and the lower fibers of the internal oblique, they are also vertical. They are horizontal. So these posterior and the upper lower fibers of these obliques, they are sort of parallel, but there's a middle fibers which are actually crossing each other. Okay, so repeat again: internal oblique coming from the iliac crest, the lateral two-third of the inguinal ligament, the lateral two-third of the inguinal ligament from the lumbar fascia, and they fan out, they insert into the lower rib cage, because they're going from below up and into the linea alba. Their lowermost fibers with the lowermost fibers of the trans abdominis. So fox inguinalis is internal oblique plus trans abdominis. They form a conjoint tendon which actually goes around the inguinal canal. That we'll discuss in detail about the inguinal canal. So that was your internal oblique. Moving from internal oblique, if we move ahead, we reach where? We reach the third muscle, that is our transversus or transverse abdominis. Now the name is self-explanatory. It means it is transversely lying. So therefore again, if we make this anti-abdominal wall and if we make this posterior abdominal wall, and suppose these are the ribs over here, these are the ribs over here, clear? We have this iliac crest, we have this whole picture over here, the sciatic notches, the tuberosities, they are going above, the foramens, the acetabulum laterally, the sacrum and all. Now again, in this transverse abdominis, again their origin is from the thoracolumbar fascia, like the internal oblique. So posterior border of both of these muscles are not free, not free. Okay, now we make over here again the inguinal ligament. This is again the inguinal ligament. Remember, inguinal ligament was coming from the external oblique aponeurosis. So now if we make a distinguishing line or a line which separates, then okay, we can make this line over here. Okay, from here means posterolaterally we have the muscle, and the anteromedially we have the aponeurosis. Now the fibers of the transverse abdominis, they are actually going like this transversely. Okay, so they will be attaching, or they will be coming from the lower ribs also, they will be coming from the iliac crest also, but they are going like this straight away, they are going like this straight away. Okay, and they will be also coming from the, not the lateral two-third, but around the lateral one-third of the inguinal ligament, lateral one-third of the inguinal ligament. Okay, now as they cross this margin, that is, once they reach the lateral border of the rectus abdominis, they suddenly become aponeurotic. So they are now where? Aponeurotic. And where are they going to attach? They are again going to attach onto the linea alba. They are going to attach on the linea alba. And again, if you remember the conjoint tendon, so the lower fibers of the lower aponeurotic fibers of the trans abdominis, they will combine with the lower aponeurotic fibers of the internal oblique, and they form the same conjoint. It is not different, it is the same conjoint tendon. So in a nutshell, again trans abdominis lying transversely, lying deeper, third layer, coming from behind from the thoracolumbar fascia, so not free, there is not a free posterior border, coming from the lower part of rib cage, from the iliac crest, from the inguinal ligament, but only the lateral one-third. Remember, the internal oblique was coming from the lateral two-third. And then they become aponeurotic over here, then they become aponeurotic over here, and again the same thing, the conjoint tendon, they loop over the structure which is lying below it, and that is your inguinal canal, that is your inguinal canal. Okay, so these are the three muscles of the anterolateral, the external oblique, internal oblique, and transverse abdominis. Their nerve supply already discussed. Now coming to the more interesting part. If you look at the muscles over here, the more interesting part is what about their actions, that what do they actually do, how do they act, how do they act. Now that is very interesting. How to understand this? See, these muscles are actually covering the abdominal wall. So when they contract, they will increase the abdominal wall pressure, they will increase the abdominal wall pressure. So what happens is, supposedly we imagine that okay, this is the whole trunk over here, this is the whole trunk over here. Okay, and it is being divided into two parts by this diaphragm over here, by this diaphragm over here. Fine. and upward you have this opening, that is your vocal cord, that is your vocal cords over here, and below you have the openings which are actually taking the waste products outside your body in the perineum, in the form of the anal canal opening, in the form of the urethral opening. So these openings, so vocal cords over here and this over here, and between you have this thoracoabdominal diaphragm. Okay, the muscles which you are concerned right now are located over here. These are your abdominal wall muscles, these are your abdominal wall muscles which you have just did. Now see what would they do, what would be their actions. But before that, you also should be knowing, and I guess you all know, that over here we have this whole sternum, and this is the costal margin. So these are your ribs over here, these are all the ribs over here, and here we have this iliac crest and all, here we have this iliac crest and all. Okay, so let us look at their functions, let us look at the function of the abdominal muscles. So they increase the pressure. Now they are going to contract, but when they are going to contract, things are going to be different. What scenario number one, the abdominal wall muscles contract, but scenario number one is, supposedly rib cage the rib cage and the diaphragm, they are relaxed. If they are relaxed, okay, so the upper part is the rib cage and the diaphragm are relaxed, these abdominal wall muscles are contracting. Once they will contract, they'll increase the abdominal pressure. Now, once this pressure is increased in the abdomen, they will actually push the diaphragm upward, and that will help in what? That will help in the forced expiration. That would help in the forced expiration. Okay, but for that you also need a contribution by this rectus abdominis, because you have to attach the lower rib cage, or the lower rib cage has to be pulled down. Okay, lower rib cage has to be pulled down also slightly, and then these muscles contract, the diaphragm is relaxed, the air goes out, that is your forced expiration. Not a normal, but a slightly forced expiration. Okay, now if this forced expiration is, if this becomes violent, if this forced expiration movement becomes violent, it would refer to coughing, sneezing, vomiting, all these things. For coughing, for sneezing, for vomiting, all these things, you need the support of the anti-abdominal wall muscles. Because try to cough. When we cough, then suddenly you should feel that our anti-abdominal wall muscles, they are contracting. Okay, so they contract, and there is expulsive movement of the air gushing out of the lungs. So that will take out the waste products from your respiratory tract. Coughing, sneezing, even the vomiting, when they have to take out from the stomach the unwanted material which is lying in the gut part. So that is scenario number one. When the rib cage and the diaphragm are relaxed, when the rib cage and diaphragm are relaxed, when they contract these muscles, the things happen from the upper side, so that there's an opening over there. Now scenario number two, what is scenario number two? Scenario number two is when this rib cage and this whole diaphragm, it is fixed, then what happens is, okay, then what happens is that we have this as the vocal cord, this we have as the diaphragm. Okay, now imagine this is fixed over here, the rib cage is fixed over here, then what will happen? So scenario number two is when the rib cage is fixed. Okay, so when the rib cage is fixed, so it is, the rib cage is not moving at all, then what happens? Once you contract the abdominal wall muscles, so when the muscles contract, which muscles, that is a topic, when the muscles contract, then what is going to happen is that it will help in the defecation, it will help in the urination, that is micturition, and it will help in the parturition. So when the rib cage is fixed, muscles going to contract, they are going to increase the intra-abdominal pressure, there is no doubt about it. But where will that pressure go? That pressure will go downwards, that is outside the body, in the form of defecation. So it will help in defecation, it will help in micturition, it will also help in parturition. Okay, it will also help in parturition. Okay, so see, the whole pressure changes. So you have to understand this whole trunk as a chamber having two walls. One wall is over here, one wall is down there in the perineum region. So these walls are controlling the whole pressure, and that pressure is being generated by the contraction of muscles. That is the whole point, the whole basic concept of this. Okay, so when the rib cage is fixed, it happens like this. Okay, now the third scenario, slightly one step forward from here, that if the rib cage is fixed, and it is so much fixed that you have the contraction of the expiratory muscles also. So in the third scenario, which is just a prolongation from this side, when there's contraction of the expiratory muscles also, so expiratory muscles try to contract, so there is no very much increase in the intra-abdominal pressure. So everything is contract, everything is increasing the pressure, but the walls are closed, both the walls are closed. The person doesn't want to micturate, and the vocal cords are also closed. So in this case, the whole trunk becomes a rigid pillar. The whole trunk becomes what? It becomes a rigid pillar, so that you can easily move your upper limbs. You can it is done, it is helpful in which activities? It is helpful in a couple of activities, like suppose you are pushing heavy objects, or you are lifting heavy objects. So when you lift heavy objects, your whole trunk becomes like a rigid pillar. The walls are closed, the whole trunk like becomes a rigid pillar. And it is in this position, when the expiratory muscles are also contracting, all the walls are closed, that there is a maximum increase in the intra-abdominal pressure. So in this position, when there is a maximum increase in the intra-abdominal pressure, chances of hernia increases. Plus, if there is any weakened sphincter in the body, that is weak sphincter of the anal sphincter or the urethral sphincter, then the urine droplets may come out. If the anal sphincter is weak, some material may also come out. So that could cause, in this position, there is a maximum increase in the intra-abdominal pressure. Okay, so these are the basic actions of the intra-abdominal or the abdominal wall muscle, not intra-abdominal but the abdominal wall muscles. So consider this whole trunk as a chamber and these two as walls. If this is fixed, the movement goes down. If this is relaxed, the movement goes up. The pressure goes above, means coughing, sneezing, or forced expiration. If everything is fixed, then it becomes like a rigid pillar. So if pressure is increased so much, that is helping the movement and all, because you are lifting heavy objects and all. So these are three men. After this, apart from this, obviously, as you see, that if suppose this is a midline, suppose this is the midline I made over here, these would be the direction of the external oblique muscles of the middle fibers mainly. Okay, these would be the direction of the internal oblique muscles, the middle fibers of internal oblique, and these would be the direction of the transverse abdominis muscle. Okay, can you see it, the direction of these fibers? And if you add over here, one more thing, that is the rectus abdominis, it goes like this. So if you see over here, the muscles in the abdominal wall, they go on a 360-degree. They're present nearly in all the directions. So basically, they help in the movement of the trunks. They will help in the movement of the trunks. They will help in the movement of the trunks also. So there's also a fourth and final muscle, mainly muscle, that is the rectus abdominis. So a quick view of the rectus abdominis, and what is it doing? A quick view of the rectus abdominis, as the name suggests, that it is a straight muscle, the rectus abdominis. So from where does it arise? So if we make again this trunk all over here, so from where does it arise? We have this costal margin with this iliac crest, with the pubic crest, the pubic tubercle over here, and this area of umbilicus. These are the rib cage, that is the costal margin, that is your body of sternum and the mandibular sternum. This muscle over here, the rectus abdominis, it takes origin or arises from the pubic crest. Okay, and it is going straight above, attaching to mainly around the 5th, 6th, and 7th costal cartilages. So this is the direction of the muscle rectus abdominis, vertically. Okay, so that is the direction of muscle rectus abdominis. Origin normally said to be from below, that is from the pubic crest and tubercle, goes above straight. Okay, and attaches very into the 5th, 6th, and 7th costal cartilages. So this is the direction of rectus abdominis. Now, what does it do? Obviously, it is a straight muscle, so it is basically used as a flexor of the abdomen. What does it mean? It means when you bend forward, obviously when this muscle will contract, its fibers, they try to come towards each other. So when the fibers will try to come towards each other, you are actually bending forwards. We are actually bending forwards. Okay, so that is the main action of rectus abdominis. Fine. Now, apart from this, it will also be helping, as we just discussed previously, it will also be helping in the forced expiration. So in the expiration movements, or the forced expiration part, that is going to help, but it is not that much helpful, where in the expulsive movements, not much helpful in the expulsive, means coughing, sneezing, or vomiting. But yes, it is helpful in the forced expiration. Okay, so that was your rectus abdominis over here. And a small muscle which you also said about the pyramidalis, sometimes it is present in the lower part behind this, functionally not very important function over here. So this is the rectus abdominis lying anteriorly. It will have few tendons intersections. So in this tendons intersections, the muscle attaches to the anterior wall of the rectus sheath. Okay, so this was, guys, just a brief overview of the abdominal muscles, main and abdominal muscles. We are not discussing the rectus sheath over here, and these were the basic concepts. So I hope you liked the video. If you like, then press on the like button and try to subscribe the channel if you have not yet subscribed, and try to share it also. Okay, that's all from my side. The next topic probably would be the anatomy of the inguinal canal, the concepts of inguinal canal. Thank you very much.